Let's go a little bit further afield now. United Kingdom Prime Minister Boris Johnson says Britain will stop putting money in coal mining projects. Johnson was speaking at the Africa Investment Summit underway in London in the United Kingdom. The Prime Minister is trying to woo African countries for trade and investment in a post-Brexit United Kingdom. The UK is scheduled to leave the European Union at the end of January. Johnson says a post-Brexit, the United Kingdom wants to be the investment partner of choice for Africa. He took a tough stance against continued dependence on coal to generate electricity.
Climate change and loss of biodiversity are issues that affect us all. I know that many of your countries are already on the front line in the fight against both. And I look forward to seeing many of you again when the UK hosts COP26 in Glasgow later this year. And of course, one of the many reasons we were chosen to host COP26 was the incredible speed with which we have cleaned up our domestic energy industry. A decade ago, we were the most carbon-heavy nation in Europe, one of the most carbon-heavy nations in Europe. Today, we're a world leader in offshore wind. We regularly generate more of our electricity from renewables than from fossil fuels, regularly. And we have almost entirely weaned ourselves off coal. But there's no point in the UK reducing the amount of coal we burn if we then trundle over to Africa and line our pockets by encouraging African states to use more of it. Is there? We all breathe the same air, we live beneath the same sky, we all suffer when carbon emissions rise and the planet warms. So from today, the British government will no longer provide any new direct official development assistance, investment, export credit or trade promotion for thermal coal mining or coal power plants overseas. To put it simply, not another penny of UK taxpayers' money will be directly invested in digging up coal or burning it for electricity. And instead, we're going to focus on supporting the transition to lower and zero carbon alternatives.
Let's get more on that summit. We cross to our correspondent in London, Hudson. A very good afternoon to Holly. Appearing that Boris Johnson trying to woo African trade partners in the face of Brexit. How was that received?
Yes, very much a wooing here of investors, businesses, entrepreneurs, and what a pitch it was. Boris Johnson describing the UK as the ultimate one-stop shop, saying that this is to create, the summit here is to create lasting partnerships, stimulate jobs and growth, and support eco-friendly projects. There have been many already announced, in particular in Kenya, the first ever green Simba bond, as it's known. That's of course a sort of IOU to try and stimulate the economy and eco-friendly projects there, as well as we heard in that clip there, Boris Johnson saying that no more of UK taxpayers' money will be spent on coal across overseas as well. So a real sort of pitch by the Prime Minister here. He spoke of the many suitors that Africa currently has and described the UK as being the only partner in modern times in this decade that Africa should well need. He spoke about Canary Wharf being bigger, a bigger financial centre than Frankfurt, describing the tech centre here as enormous. So really vying for those opportunities in what we've seen described many a time here already at the summit, an emerging Africa. Many facts have been bandied about, touted by the Prime Minister, not least that 8 of the 15 fastest growing economies are African countries. 35 billion in total in trade between the UK and Africa in 2018. And a real aim, a real goal of this summit from the UK perspective is certainly to capitalise, to cement those relationships and also renegotiate relationships, as well as the UK looks set to leave the European Union on the 31st of January.
Holly, we know that some of the UK's top trading partners around 2-3 years ago were South Africa, Nigeria, Egypt, Morocco and Algeria. How well represented are those countries at that UK-Africa Investment Summit?
Well, yes, in a sign of sort of the importance that the UK is putting on this summit, Prince Harry has just arrived. Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, is of course hosting this summit, and several senior members of his cabinet, the Foreign Secretary, the Business Secretary, the Trade Secretary and the International Development Secretary, all here. There will be the usual pomp and ceremony laid out for leaders of African nations later at Buckingham Palace, hosted by the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. But here there is a slightly more low-level delegation on behalf of African nations. We're expecting sort of 15 or so heads of state, and of course President Cyril Ramaphosa has decided not to attend. The reason being, according to Pretoria, he wants to focus on issues at home, pressing domestic priorities. And I, in the last few minutes, spoke to Minister Pandor, who's leading the delegation here now. She dismissed any concerns, any sort of bad signals that might emit President Cyril Ramaphosa's absence. She said that it is very important that he focuses on those issues at home, and that is her job. That is what she is here to do. She doesn't feel that there will be any nerves here in the UK as a result of that, because of course the President has attended similar summits in other countries. Of course, there's been a USA Africa summit, there's been a China Africa summit, there's been an India Africa summit. Many of these have taken place over the past few years, which has also led to some scepticism that the UK is a bit late to the party in that regard, and is sort of vying for so many opportunities. Of course, Boris Johnson, well aware of that, made a reference to it many times in his speech. Many suitors that are hoping to capitalise on the investment opportunities that Africa so presents at this time.
Holly, one thing that came out of that clip that we played earlier on was the fact that there's not going to be a further investment in coal. We know that South Africa is battling with energy and energy production challenges. Take us through a little bit more of that.
Yes, so there's a real focus here, not just on housing and technology. We've already heard a lot of projects in relation to clean electricity, but a real focus, as you heard in that clip by Boris Johnson, on renewable energy, how businesses here in the UK can help Africa and African nations to become more sustainable, to become more green. And we can expect to hear several more similar announcements throughout the day in relation to different African nations. Different meetings between heads of state. Of course, those relations will be very important for the UK to maintain those ties. Now it's severing its own with the European Union, and this will be seen, as we've already heard from heads of state of Nigeria and other African nations, this will be seen as a sort of reconfiguration in many ways, in particular in relation to such industries as coal, as to how Africa can move forward along with the rest of the world.
Holly Hudson giving us an update from the UK Africa Investment Summit that's taking place there. We'll be getting updates from her continually on that. Let's come back